Emmanuel hated airports. Not because of the flights, he could handle those with headphones and jazz playlists, but because of the avalanche of selfies, the muffled screams of fans, and the looks people gave him as if he were some exotic creature that had just escaped from a zoo. "You're only going to be in this city for 2 days?" asked Daniel, his manager, as they walked out of the airport, both wearing sunglasses, caps, and an unnecessary scarf. "I came here for the love of my life," Emmanuel said, dead serious. Daniel glanced at him sideways. "What? Are you telling me you dragged me here for a woman?" "No," Emmanuel replied, smiling with that sparkle in his eye he had when acting. "I came for a chocolate cake." Daniel sighed like a man who had already lived through too many pop star meltdowns. Emmanuel had been touring for months, recordings, film sets, interviews, premieres, and more fake smiles than his soul could carry. What he needed wasn't a beach vacation or a new song. He needed a good cake. One that wasn't decorated with edible gold or served on a plate with artificial fog. Just a chocolate cake. Real. Human. "And you're going to tell me you already know where to go?" Daniel asked, checking the itinerary on his tablet. "The driver recommended it," Emmanuel said, pointing to the man waiting beside the car. The driver, a man with more gray hairs than patience, nodded. "Bakery Clara's Delight, sir. The best you'll try in this city. But they close at 7. And it's 6:40. Emmanuel didn't say a word. He just dove into the back seat like a cowboy in pursuit. "Then hit the gas, there's a cake with my name on it." The car stopped in front of a small bakery with a red awning and warm lights that looked like something out of a Christmas movie. Emmanuel jumped out with the excitement of a kid on Three Kings Day. The street was nearly empty and the closing sign was already blinking on the door. But just before he could go in, someone unintentionally stopped him. Or rather, someone was already standing in front of him. A woman. Emmanuel couldn't fully see her, just her brown hair tied in a messy bun, an oversized blue coat, and a knitted scarf in colors no one would dare to combine, except someone who wasn't afraid of looking ridiculous. Or who had great taste and simply didn't care. She was speaking with the shop assistant. "1 chocolate cake, please," she said with a clear, confident voice, but with a hint of anxiety that only true sugar lovers would recognize. "And a lemon tea to go." Emmanuel froze. Exactly the same thing he was going to order. The shop assistant, a smiling woman with a flour-stained apron, leaned toward her. "You're lucky, miss. That's the last cake of the day." Emmanuel swallowed hard. No. This can't be happening. This was not the ending he had imagined for his cake adventure. When Montserrat paid, Emmanuel could barely get a word out. I'd like the same," he told the woman when it was his turn, pointing to the cake already in the hands of the other customer. The woman smiled at him kindly but without mercy. "I'm sorry, young man. There's no more cake left. I can only offer you a spinach empanada." Emmanuel felt his heart breaking slowly like a cookie without milk. And that's when he really saw her. The woman with the cake. She was turning around. He looked up. And for a second, half a second, maybe their eyes met. She was beautiful. But not like the models who surrounded him at gala events. She was beautiful like a Sunday without alarms, like an honest laugh, like a breakfast served by surprise. Emmanuel stepped a little closer. "Excuse me," he said softly, almost shyly. "Would you sell me your cake?" She looked at him. Recognized him instantly. Of course she did. He was Emmanuel Rios, the actor, the singer, the one who starred in Winter Song. But she pretended not to. She just raised an eyebrow, defiantly. "And why would I sell you my cake?" Emmanuel opened his arms like he was surrendering to fate. "Because I leave at dawn. And I won't be able to come back tomorrow to try it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance, like, I don't know, a chocolate eclipse." She tilted her head, amused. All right. I'll sell it to you for $100. He looked at her, half disbelieving, half fascinated. 100? That cake costs 15. "You know, inflation, nostalgia, unrepeatable experiences," she said with a sly smile. Emmanuel laughed. He couldn't help it. He pulled a bill from his wallet like someone paying a ransom. "Deal." She handed him the little cardboard box, but before letting it go, she looked at it as if saying goodbye to an old friend. Then, in a theatrical tone, she said, "Thank you for your purchase, sir." They both burst out laughing. She turned around. So did he. They walked in opposite directions. But without meaning to, they both stopped at the same time. And looked back. Just for a second. Just a glance. And then they kept walking with a silly smile and a cake in hand. Emmanuel had experienced many kinds of fame. He had been screamed at, kissed, chased, even once mistaken for a wax figure in Madrid. But never had it happened that someone didn't recognize him and still stole his heart. Because that's exactly what had happened in that bakery. With the cake girl. With Montserrat. Are you thinking about her again? Asked Daniel, his manager, without looking up from the email he was typing on his phone. Who? Emmanuel bit into his toast with fake innocence, sitting on the hotel terrace. The cake girl, Daniel snorted. Or better yet, the cake thief. You didn't stop talking about her in the car. Her laugh, how her scarf looked like her grandma knitted it, how her eyes said no, but her soul was begging for sugar. I said that. Yes. And I wrote it down because it sounded like lyrics to a cheap song. Emmanuel smiled as he shook a sugar packet over his tea. She was different, you know? She didn't faint, she didn't scream, she didn't ask for a selfie. She asked me for $100 for a cake. Well, I'll give her that, it was original. Emmanuel leaned back in his chair, gazing at the city's gray sky. It was one of those days that threatened rain but couldn't decide. Like his mind. Like his heart. And like the tea which still tasted bland without the right cake beside it. A few kilometers away, Montserrat was also thinking about the cake. And, unfortunately, about the cake man. I don't believe you, said her co-worker Carla as they sorted cups in the cafe where they both worked. You sold your cake to Emmanuel Rios? The actor? The one who sings like, I'm gonna break your heart but apologize with flowers. The same one, said Montserrat, washing a mug like she didn't care at all. Though she'd been washing that same mug for 20 minutes. And you didn't ask for a photo? An autograph? A hug, at least, for being that good-looking? No, Montserrat replied with a shrug. Why would I? Carla looked at her like she'd just announced she hated puppies and chocolate. Because you've been a fan of his since you were 16. Because you cried during that movie where he froze to death in the ocean. Because you sang his Broken Moons album in the shower all through 2020. Montserrat shrugged again, this time more guiltily. Yeah, but I didn't want to be just another one. He must be sick of it. I want it to be normal. You asked him for $100 for a cake. That's not normal. Montserrat smiled. It was funny, wasn't it? It was brilliant. And completely you, Carla said. But you know what else would be brilliant? What? Go find him. Go to that hotel where we know he's staying. Give him back the $85 and say, hi, I'm not a fan, but I would like to get to know you. Boom. Montserrat looked at her like Carla had asked her to walk barefoot over lava. Are you insane? Go to his hotel like some stalker? What if he's busy? What if he has a girlfriend? Or worse, a grumpy bodyguard? Or maybe, Carla said with a wink, he's hungry. And remembers you still owe him half a cake. Montserrat laughed, but her mind was no longer in the cafe. That night, Emmanuel canceled dinner with the mayor, the local radio interview, and a photo shoot for shirts handmade by monks in the Himalayas. You're sure you want to stay in the room watching old shows? Daniel asked, completely baffled. Yes. And bring me something sweet if you can. Chocolate cake. Emmanuel threw a pillow at him. Don't joke about my wounds, Daniel. Emmanuel stood up from the couch and put on his jacket. I'm going out for a walk. I need some air. Don't wait up. Should I drive you? His assistant asked. No, I want to get lost for a while. Just be someone else for a bit. Daniel watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, as Emmanuel disappeared into the elevator. Emmanuel didn't quite know how, but he ended up at the Malecon. The boardwalk was calm. The yellow streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. The sea, dark and rhythmic, seemed to whisper secrets. Emmanuel walked with his hands in his pockets, thinking about many things and about only one at the same time. And then he saw her. Sitting on the edge of the railing, a beer in her hand, laughing to herself as if the world were a comedy film. Montserrat. She slowly turned her head, blinked, and smiled. Are you following me? Or did the chocolate cake bind us forever? Maybe the universe wants you to give me my money back, he joked as he approached. What if I already spent it on beer? Then you'd better offer me one. She handed him a cold can with a theatrical gesture. Fair warning. This brand isn't worthy of an international singer. After what I paid for a cake yesterday, anything seems reasonable. They both laughed. Emmanuel sat next to her, and the sound of the sea blended with their laughter. They talked about everything. Bad movies, imaginary pets, the absurdity of becoming an adult. And when the beer ran out, they didn't need anything else. There was something in that night, something calm and strange, that wrapped around them like an old song that still sounds good. They didn't kiss. They didn't have to. But when Montserrat rested her head on his shoulder, and he let the wind tousle his soul, they knew that night would stay with them forever. The sun came through the window with a treacherous softness. One of those lights that seemed to say, "Good morning, Even though you did something last night you'd rather forget. Montserrat slowly opened her eyes. First, she saw the white ceiling. Then the fan spinning lazily. Next, a shirt on the floor that clearly wasn't hers. And then, "Oh no!" she whispered. A scream caught in her throat. She turned slowly and saw him, Emmanuel, sleeping peacefully on his back, hair tousled. With such a calm expression he looked like an angel. The famous angel. An angel with whom she'd shared beer, laughter, and clearly more than that. "No, no, no, no," she muttered under her breath, as if casting a spell to rewind time. She tiptoed out of bed, picking up her shoes from the floor like a thief in flight. She tried to remember if she'd said something ridiculous. Had she laughed like a seal? Had she cried over one of his songs? Had she confessed she had a poster of him in her teenage years? She didn't know. All that was clear was that she had to run before Emmanuel woke up and saw her. Hair mess, no makeup, and her dignity wrinkled at the bottom of her purse. She slipped out of the room like a shadow and took the hotel stairs without looking back. And just like that, Montserrat vanished from Emmanuel Rios's radar. "Where is she?" Emmanuel shouted half an hour later, waking up alone in the room. Daniel, rushing in with a cup of coffee, thought he was talking about his sunglasses or his phone. "What's missing?" "Her. Montserrat. The cake girl." "She disappeared?" "Yes. And I don't have her number, her last name. I don't even know if that's her real name. She could have been a spy. Or an undercover fan. Or a ninja baker. Why didn't you ask for her info?" "Because I fell asleep. I fell asleep like a happy idiot." Daniel sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. "So, now what?" "Now nothing," said Emmanuel, staring at the hollow in the pillow where she had been. "All I can do is hope destiny is as stubborn as it was last night. But sometimes destiny takes a vacation." And that was the last time Emmanuel saw Montserrat for 3 years. Montserrat, for her part, didn't just escape the hotel. She hid from the world. She locked herself in her apartment like it was an emotional bunker. She ignored calls, dodged Carla's questions, and avoided any of Emmanuel's songs on the radio. She convinced herself that what happened was a mistake, that it wouldn't happen again, that it was better this way. But every time she passed a bakery, the smell of chocolate cake betrayed her. And every time a friend mentioned Emmanuel Rios, her heart gave a small nudge from inside. 3 years. 1900 and something days. And yet, the memory was still fresh, like a cake that was never served. Meanwhile, Emmanuel filled stadiums, signed contracts, recorded albums, kissed actresses on red carpets, and smiled in every photo. But he never slept as peacefully as he did that night beside Montserrat. And no woman he met after that ever tasted like honesty or laughed over cheap beer like she did. Daniel tried everything, tracing the bakery, searching hotel records, even combing through social media comments looking for a Montserrat. Nothing. Just a name. Just one night. And a cake he never forgot. Montserrat buckled her seatbelt and closed her eyes. She had looked forward to this trip more eagerly than a cup of coffee during a night shift. 3 years without a vacation, 3 years of endless shifts, midnight surgeries, patients who look at you with fear and hope at the same time, and finally, a week just for her. Carla was right. I needed a break. Beach sun, silence, and 0 distractions. She sighed. But as usual, it didn't take long for her to think of him. Emmanuel Rios. He showed up where she least expected, in magazines, in interviews, in songs they played in the operating room. She had learned to ignore his face on covers and his fleeting romances that the media loved to report. At least she tried to, because on long nights when she came home and collapsed in bed, she dreamed of him. And in the dreams he always remembered her. But of course, in real life, he probably didn't even remember her name anymore. She shook her head and opened a book to distract herself. Vacation, Montserrat. Disconnect. Restart. Breathe. No more than 20 minutes into the flight, an agitated voice interrupted her thoughts. Is there a doctor on board? We need urgent help. Montserrat snapped the book shut. Without thinking, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up with the same firmness she had entering an operating room. Instinct guided her. A visibly nervous flight attendant led her down the aisle. It's a passenger in first class. He lost consciousness. He's pale and has an irregular pulse. Age? Pre-existing conditions? Medications? Montserrat asked as she walked. We don't know. He's traveling alone. Montserrat nodded. She knelt by the seat, took the wrist of the unconscious man, and her world stopped. It was Emmanuel. That unmistakable jaw. That messy hair. Those perfect eyebrows that somehow looked expressive even while unconscious. He was pale, his shirt slightly unbuttoned and wearing a hospital bracelet on his wrist. What the hell? Montserrat whispered, swallowing hard. Do you know him? The flight attendant asked. Let's say yes. But now's not the time. Bring me a blood pressure monitor and a pulse oximeter. And water. I need to know if he's dehydrated. As she took his pulse, her head was a whirlwind of medical adrenaline and emotional chaos. Why is he here? Why is he alone? What happened to him? Is this a stress-induced hallucination? Come on, Emmanuel, don't make me do CPR mid-flight with half the cabin watching. She murmured in his ear with a nervous smile. As if hearing her from another plane of existence, he opened his eyes, slowly, confused, and when he saw her. Montserrat? She froze. He looked at her like someone finding something they had lost a long time ago. Am I dreaming, or did I faint again? You're not dreaming. But you almost shut down like an old TV. What happened to you? He gave a weak smile. Got sick. Weird virus. Fainted. And now I see angels. I'm not an angel, I'm your temporary doctor. Stay still. Were you always a doctor? Were you always this nosy? The flight attendant watched the scene with her mouth slightly open, like she was watching a live romantic movie. Montserrat took his blood pressure and noticed it was dropping. She asked the crew to give him oxygen. You need fluids. As soon as we land, you're going straight to a hospital. And will you take care of me? I'm on vacation. So am I ever since I lost you. Montserrat blinked. Her hardened face, the one she used to look at blood without flinching, began to crack. Emmanuel. 3 years, Montserrat. 3. I even searched in the wrong bakeries. She let out a brief laugh. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to feel something other than exhaustion. Maybe, hope. The flight attendant timidly interrupted. Is everything under control, doctor? Yes, Montserrat said without taking her eyes off Emmanuel. He's in good hands. This time. I don't plan on running away, at least not until he gets better. The hospital had mint green walls and the smell of disinfectant. Not the most romantic setting in the world, but Montserrat didn't care. Emmanuel, for his part, had an 4 in his arm, a low-grade fever, and his hair was a complete mess. And yet he still managed to look like the lead in a primetime soap opera. Genetics are so unfair. So you're telling me I ate street ceviche and sushi on the same night? He asked, staring at the ceiling. Well, that explains a lot. It explains why you almost collapsed, yes. Montserrat replied from the armchair beside the bed. But it doesn't explain why you thought that was a good idea. I was hungry. My stomach betrayed me. Like you did 3 years ago. She gave him a look of pure judgment, but couldn't help laughing. He was already better, with color back in his cheeks and jokes on his lips. But those first 48 hours were another story. Montserrat had barely slept, barely eaten. She had cared for him like he was the most important patient in the world. Which, to be honest, he was, at least to her. He'd been feverish and out of it, and at one point he'd asked if she still had that chocolate cake. She cried laughing, and also from worry. But now, seeing him recover, joking with nurses, something inside her settled into place. Her heart finally knew where it belonged. Thanks for staying, he said, suddenly serious. Not just these days. Thanks for not leaving this time. She raised an eyebrow at him. You know you owe me a cake, right? I'll pay you back with a wedding. What? Marry me? She blinked. He said it like he was offering her a coffee, as if they weren't surrounded by 4 machines and nosy nurses. You're delirious again. I'm more clear-headed than ever. If you're going to save my life, I want it to be forever. Montserrat laughed nervously. Then she looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment, under the hospital lights and the constant beep of the heart monitor, she knew. Yes. She wanted this. Forever. With the sweet-toothed, joke-making man. Months later, the wedding was intimate. Few guests, lots of flowers, and a dessert table that looked like an altar. Montserrat wore a white dress without a gown or stethoscope. Emmanuel wore a suit without a fever or oxygen. She said yes, just before he told a joke that ruined the solemn moment, but made everyone laugh. That's how they were. Imperfect, unexpected, charming. They lived in a house with a garden, surrounded by books, records, and cake pans. He said he owed her his life. She said he made her laugh back. And every time they argued, they settled it with lemon tea and a slice of chocolate cake. Only now, no one had to fight over the last piece.